Welcome to a new episode from Perfect English Podcast. Today we're going to learn some idioms that have to do with praise and criticism. Now we will start with the positive side. We will listen to some conversations between two people, and in the response of the second person, we will hear the idiom that almost repeats what the first person says and sums it up in a way that emphasizes the thing the first person says, but using an idiom. So let's get cracking and let's start with the first conversation, or let's call it mini conversation. So here we have the first person says, "That little village was the most wonderful, beautiful place I've ever seen." And the second person responds, "Yes, it really was out of this world, wasn't it?" So, what was the idiom? Out of this world. Out of this world. What does that mean? If you look back at what the first person said, the first person was describing the little village as the most wonderful, beautiful place, etc. And the second person agrees and says it was out of this world. So, did you guess the meaning of the idiom? Well, if you say that something is out of this world, you're emphasizing that it is extremely good or impressive, just like this village they were talking about. So, our first idiom is out of this world, extremely good, impressive. And now let's move to the second mini conversation. The first person says, "Professor Breen is the best lecturer I've ever heard." And the second person agrees and says, "Yes, he's second to none, isn't he?" So, what is the idiom? Second to none. Second to none. So, the first person was praising how great Professor Breen as a lecturer. He is the best lecturer I've ever heard. And the second person says, "Yes, he's second to none." So what do you think second to none means? What are we emphasizing here? Now, obviously, when we use second to none, we are emphasizing that, in this case, a person, but we can use it for things as well, that this person or this thing is very good indeed, and actually he is the best there is. Second to none. So, that was our second idiom. Let's move to the third mini conversation. "I'm not looking forward to being group leader after John. He's so popular and successful." And the second person says, "Yes, he's a hard act to follow. He's a hard act to follow." So, the idiom here is a hard act to follow. Now, when we say about a person that he is a hard act to follow, in this case, we're talking about John. Somebody is going to become the group leader after John, but the problem is that John was so popular, successful, so it will be difficult to replace a person as popular and as successful. He is a hard act to follow. So, what is the meaning of idiom? When we call somebody as a hard act to follow, that means this person is so impressive or effective that it is difficult for anyone else who comes after them to be as good. And that was the case for John. He's a hard act to follow. And now let's move to the next mini conversation. The first person says, "Oh, I do like our new sofa. It looks just perfect here." And the second person says, "Yes, it's just made for this room, isn't it?" So what is the idiom here? Now, the idiom is not the whole "made for this room." It is "made for." When you use it in this context, in this way, when you say something is made for this place, made for this job, etc., what does that mean? When you say this person is made for it. Well, what did the first person say? The first person said, "Oh, I do like our new sofa. It looks just perfect here." So what do you think made for means? It simply means perfect. You're emphasizing that something is perfect in the situation, in this place, for this job, etc. It is made for it. It is made for this room, for the case of the sofa we're talking about in this mini conversation. All right? So let's move to the next idiom in the next mini conversation. "I admire William. He defended himself very well in the face of all the criticism and made some good points against his critics too." The second person responds, "Yes, he gave as good as he got, didn't he? He gave as good as he got." And this is the idiom we're learning here. to give something as good as you get, we talk about things we say as good as it gets, etc. In this case, of course, we're talking in the past. So we said he gave as good as he got. But the expression is as good as he, she, it, they, we get, or obviously gets. So what does it mean? When you give as good as you get, what does that mean? We're talking about William, who defended himself very well in the face of all the criticism and made some good points against his critics too. He did well, and he did his best. Maybe that's the idiom. That's what the idiom is talking about. Of course, the other person can simply say, yeah, he did his best. But here, when he said instead, yes, he gave as good as he got, didn't he? There is emphasis. We use idioms in this case to emphasize the fact. We can use other language to express the same meaning, but sometimes we tend to use those idioms to emphasize the meaning, to make it stronger. So, as good as he got, that means he gave it his best. And now let's move to the next idiom and the next mini conversation. Now, the first person says, I don't think we'll get tickets for the cup final. They're all sold and we'd have to pay a huge sum of money to buy some on the black market. The other person says, yes, they're like gold dust. So the idiom here is gold dust. They're like gold dust. What are they anyway? We're talking about tickets for the cup final. And because they're all sold and the only place where you can find the tickets is going to be in the black market, so they're going to cost a fortune. They're going to be very expensive. So, do you think that is related, that they're like gold dust? Actually, it is. When you say something or a type of thing is like gold dust, or sometimes we can even say they're gold dust without like. If you say that, you mean it is very difficult to obtain, usually because everyone wants it. And in our case here, they're very difficult to obtain, the tickets, because everybody wants to buy the tickets. So that's what makes them like gold dust. All right, and now for the last idiom we're going to use for praise before we move to idioms that we use to criticize people instead. The last mini conversation. Dr. Zasta's research is incredibly original and he has made some important new discoveries. The other person says, yes, he's done some really groundbreaking work. So what do you think the idiom is? The idiom is obviously groundbreaking. So what do you think groundbreaking means? We're talking about a doctor's research. We're talking about it is incredibly original, important new discoveries, and the other person is emphasizing with groundbreaking. So what do you think groundbreaking means? Well, it simply means innovative. Groundbreaking work means innovative work. So that was all about idioms we use to praise people. Now to remember quickly what these were, we used out of this world, second to none, a hard act to follow, made for a special place or an occasion, he gave as good as he got, like gold dust, and groundbreaking. And now we will move to the other side, the negative side of it, which is criticizing people. Idioms we use to criticize people. And we're going to read Alice's account of some problems she had with a colleague at work. She's going to use a lot of idioms to criticize this person, and we're going to stop and talk about these idioms. So let's start. Obviously, she had problems with that colleague. She's not going to praise that colleague. It's going to be mostly criticism. So let's start. Well, when I started working with her, at first she was all sweetness and light. But after a while, she started getting on my nerves, and we soon began to have arguments over stupid things. So let me stop here before I continue, because here we have two idioms. Now, the first idiom was when she said, at first she was all sweetness and light. So all sweetness and light. What does that mean? The words are positive, but put these words together, they mean something negative. We use this expression to criticize people, not to praise them. So when we say she was all sweetness and light, or obviously he was or they were all sweetness and light, that means this person is friendly and pleasant, but in a false way. So remember, friendly and pleasant, but in a false way. It is not true. This person is not honest. All sweetness and light, but all were lies. That was all false. And the second idiom, she said, but after a while she started getting on my nerves. Getting on my nerves. When someone gets on your nerves, what does that mean? That means this person starts to irritate or annoy you. This person starts to get on your nerves. So let's continue from here and let's see what else she has to say. If I made even a small mistake with my work, she would give me a hard time, and she would poke fun at me if I smiled at or chatted with any of our male colleagues. So here, let me stop again because we have two idioms here. Now, she said, if I made even a small mistake with my work, she would give me a hard time. When someone gives you a hard time, what does that mean? That means this person makes you suffer or feel guilty. If this person makes you suffer or feel guilty, you can use the expression, this person is giving me a hard time. Or, of course, remember always that there is a part of the idiom you can change, and mostly is the verb. You don't change a hard time. You change give, of course, because you can say give, gave, is giving, etc. So, to give somebody a hard time, that means to make this person suffer or feel guilty. And what about the next idiom? And she would poke fun at me if I smiled or chatted with my male colleagues. To poke fun at somebody, that means to tease this person or to mock this person, meaning to make fun of that person. You can obviously say make fun of this person instead of poke fun at, and the meaning is just the same. So let's continue. To add insult to injury, she began to cast aspersions on my honesty. And one day when some money disappeared from someone's handbag, she told people she thought I'd stolen it. So let's stop here before we continue the last part. The problems between these two are getting serious. Here she started by saying to add insult to injury. What does that mean? It is an idiom, obviously. To add insult to injury simply means to make a bad situation even worse. So when you make a bad situation even worse, we can use this expression to add insult to injury. And then she said she began to cast aspersions on my honesty. And to cast aspersions on something means to criticize my character and suggest that I was not honest. Now, this is a little bit formal idiom to use. I know it's not common to have formal idioms, but this one is. To cast aspersions on is to criticize someone's character and suggest that this person is not honest. And now let's continue the last part of the account of Alice and her problem with her colleague. I don't think she was an out-and-out evil person, but she was certainly asking for trouble. And one day I just lost my temper and, told her exactly what I thought of her and how much I disliked her. She hasn't spoken to me since that day. Now, obviously, that was inevitable. Now, these two, they couldn't get along well with each other since the beginning. There were a lot of problems, a lot of misunderstandings. So here we have two idioms. First, she said, I don't think she was an out-and-out evil person. Out and out. Now, out-and-out evil person, that means completely or totally, and we use it for negative qualities of people. So you don't say out-and-out gorgeous person, out-and-out generous person. You say out-and-out mean person, out-and-out evil person, like in this case. So out-and-out means completely or totally, but we use it for negative qualities of people. And the last idiom for today is she was certainly asking for trouble. The idiom is ask for trouble. If someone is asking for trouble, this person is doing things that were certain to result in trouble. And sometimes, instead of asking for trouble, you can simply say asking for it. Asking for it. So here we can say she was certainly asking for it. And it has obviously the same meaning, but it's a little bit more informal. So asking for trouble, asking for it, both of these idioms mean the same thing. Doing things that were certain to result in trouble. So again, let me remind you quickly with the idioms we use to criticize people. All sweetness and light, getting on my nerves, give me a hard time, poke fun at me, to add insult to injury, cast aspersions on, out and out, and asking for trouble. I hope you found the idioms I shared with you today useful, and I hope you find the right place to use them in your conversations. This is your host, Danny, saying thank you very much for listening to another episode from Perfect English Podcast. Now, this time, I'm not going to say I'm going to see you tomorrow. Actually, I'm going to see you on Monday. And that is because I'm making some changes to the podcast. I'm adding more content to the podcast. I hope you like the new content. We're going to have word of the day. We're going to have some cultural English content. Because if you want to learn English, it's not just about the vocabulary, the grammar, the expressions, etc. To learn English, you have to listen to a lot of English, listen to a lot of stories, a lot of context, a lot of topics and subjects, because that is what you're going to use, whether you want to use it in writing or you want to talk to somebody. You can't just depend on the words you learn here and there or the grammar you learn here and there. That's very good, but it's not enough. But don't worry, I got you covered. I'm going to add more content to this podcast, and we're going to start from Monday. So I'll see you on Monday. Again, thank you very much for listening to today's episode. Bye for now.